The heavy curtain trembled slightly as the music from the stage faded, and behind it stood a boy who looked far too small for the moment waiting for him. Luis pressed his bare toes into the cold floor, feeling every crack beneath his feet. The fabric of his white shirt hung loosely on his thin frame, faded from countless washes, the collar frayed where his mother had stitched it back together late one night by the light of a single bulb. He could hear the crowd on the other side, thousands of voices blending into a low, restless hum. To them, this was another audition. To him, it was everything. A stagehand gently motioned for him to get ready. Luis nodded, though his throat was tight and dry. His hands wrapped around the microphone, and he held it close, not just as a tool, but as if it were something solid he could lean on. In his mind, images flashed rapidly. A small wooden house with a rusted tin roof, rain leaking through during storms, his mother kneeling over a basin of clothes, scrubbing until her hands turned red. He remembered the sound of her cough late at night and the way she smiled anyway when he sang to her, even when there was nothing but rice on the table. The curtain began to part. Light poured in, blinding and overwhelming. Luis took a careful step forward, then another, until he was fully on the stage. The vastness of the theater hit him all at once. Rows upon rows of people stretched into the darkness, their faces barely visible, but their presence undeniable. High above, cameras hovered silently, red lights blinking like watchful eyes. At the center sat the judges, polished and confident, so different from anyone he had ever spoken to before. Applause rippled politely through the audience as he reached the mark at center stage. Luis bowed his head slightly, unsure where to look. He felt small, exposed, as if every secret he had ever carried was written on his skin. The applause faded, and a gentle silence followed. "Hello," one of the judges said warmly. "What's your name?" "Luis," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He swallowed and tried again. "My name is Luis. And where are you from?" "Luis. From the Philippines," he said. Saying it out loud made his chest ache with pride and longing at the same time. Another judge leaned forward. "How old are you?" 12, he answered. He hesitated, then added softly, "I think." A few quiet murmurs passed through the crowd, not mocking, concerned. The judge smiled gently. "What brings you to the stage of America's Got Talent today?" Luis looked down at his feet. The bright stage lights reflected off the floor, making it hard to see anything else. His fingers tightened around the microphone. This was the part he hadn't practiced. Songs were easy compared to words. "I sing," he said slowly. "I sing because my mother likes it." "And where is your mother now?" another judge asked. Luis lifted his gaze slightly, scanning the crowd as if she might suddenly appear among the strangers. "She is at home," he said. "She washes clothes for other people. That is her job." There was something in his tone. No self-pity, no drama, just truth. The audience leaned in, drawn closer by the simplicity of it. "She works every day," Luis continued. "Sometimes very early, sometimes very late. When she is tired, I sing for her. She says when I sing, she forgets the pain in her hands." The theater felt different now. Quieter. He could sense it, even without looking up. One judge asked gently, "What will happen if you win this competition?" Luis hesitated. His eyes glistened, though no tears fell yet. "If I win," he said, "I want my mother to rest. Even just one day. I want her to sit and listen. Not work." A collective breath seemed to pass through the audience. Someone sniffed. Somewhere, a hand came up to cover a mouth. The judge nodded slowly. "That's a beautiful reason. Whenever you're ready, Luis." The music cue sounded. A simple piano introduction, soft and unassuming. Luis closed his eyes as the first notes filled the space around him. For a brief moment, the massive theater disappeared. He was back home, standing on a cracked concrete floor, singing into the air while his mother scrubbed clothes nearby, smiling at him over her shoulder. He lifted the microphone and sang the first line. His voice was light, almost fragile, but it carried. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't try to be. It trembled slightly, shaped by emotion more than technique. Each word seemed carefully placed, as if he was afraid to waste even one. The melody flowed gently, and his voice followed, rising and falling like a quiet confession. As he sang, faces in the audience softened. People who had come expecting entertainment now found themselves listening instead, really listening. The judges exchanged glances, eyebrows lifting, eyes narrowing not in criticism but in awe. Luis reached the chorus, and his voice grew stronger, pushed forward by something deeper than confidence. It was longing. It was gratitude. It was the ache of a child who had learned too early how heavy life could be. When he sang about hope, it didn't sound imagined, it sounded earned. Halfway through the song, his voice cracked. For a split second, panic flickered across his face. He lowered his head, breath hitching. The piano continued, patient, waiting. Luis took a shaky breath and sang again, this time softer, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. He let them fall. That was the moment the audience broke. People wiped their eyes openly now. Some leaned into their neighbors. A judge pressed their fingers to their lips, blinking rapidly. Another shook their head slowly, as if trying to understand how such a small voice could hold so much weight. Luis sang the final lines with his eyes closed, his face wet with tears, his hands trembling but steady enough to hold the microphone. When the last note faded, it lingered in the air like a held breath. Then there was silence, not the awkward kind, but the reverent kind. The kind that happens when no one wants to disturb what they've just felt. Luis opened his eyes, unsure. His heart pounded as he looked out at the audience, waiting, wondering if he had done enough. And then the silence shattered. For a moment after the last note faded, Luis wasn't sure if he was still standing on the stage or if he had drifted into a dream. The silence pressed in around him, thick and heavy, and his heart hammered so loudly he thought the microphones might pick it up. His fingers loosened around the microphone, suddenly weak, and he stared out into the darkness beyond the lights, searching for any sign of what came next. Then a single clap echoed. Another followed, then another. Within seconds, the sound multiplied, swelling into a wave that crashed through the theater. The audience rose from their seats almost instinctively, chairs scraping the floor as thousands of people stood at once. The applause wasn't polite anymore. It was fierce, emotional, alive. Cheers rang out, mixed with shouts and sobs, hands clapping until palms stung. Luis froze. His eyes widened, confusion washing over his tear-streaked face. He had never seen so many people stand for him. At home, when he finished singing, there was usually just his mother's tired smile and a soft, "Thank you." This was something else entirely. The sound wrapped around him, vibrating through his chest, making it hard to breathe. He tried to bow, awkward and unsure, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. They trembled, threatening to give way beneath him. Cheers poured freely now, no longer quiet or controlled. He lifted a hand to his face, trying to wipe them away, but they kept coming. The judges stood too. One of them placed both hands on the table, leaning forward, eyes shining. Another stood with their head bowed slightly, clapping slowly, deliberately, as if each clap was meant just for him. When the applause finally softened enough for voices to be heard, Luis could hear sniffles even from the judges' table. "My goodness," one judge said, their voice unsteady. "Luis, I don't even know where to begin." Luis looked toward them, shoulders hunched, as if bracing himself. He nodded politely, the way he had been taught to speak to adults, though his mind was spinning. "You came out here with nothing but your voice," the judge continued, "and somehow you filled this entire room. That wasn't just singing. That was your heart." Another judge wiped their eyes openly, not bothering to hide it. "I've been doing this a long time," they said. "And moments like this, they don't happen often. You reminded all of us why we sit at this table." Luis clutched the microphone again, holding it close to his chest now, as if afraid the moment might slip away if he didn't anchor himself to something real. The third judge leaned forward, softer now. "When you were singing, I forgot about the competition. I forgot about the lights, the cameras. I just saw a boy who loves his mother so much that he turned pain into music." At the mention of his mother, Luis broke completely. A sob escaped his chest, raw and unfiltered. He bent forward slightly, shoulders shaking, no longer trying to be brave. The audience responded with another surge of applause, encouraging, supportive, wrapping him in sound like a protective embrace. "You don't have to say anything," the judge said gently. "Just know that what you did tonight mattered." Luis nodded through tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you very much." The host stepped onto the stage, placing a careful hand near Luis, not touching, but close enough to steady him if he fell. "How are you feeling right now?" the host asked softly. Luis laughed through his tears, a small, incredulous sound. "I feel light," he said after a moment. "Like I am floating." The audience laughed with him, not at him, and the tension eased just a little. The host turned back to the judges. "I think we all know what this moment feels like," they said. "But the decision is yours." The judges exchanged glances. There was a pause, long enough for anticipation to bloom, for hearts to pound all over the theater. Luis's breathing slowed as he waited, though his hands still trembled. One judge stood fully now, stepping away from the table. The audience gasped, sensing something monumental approaching. The judge looked at Luis, eyes warm and resolute. "Luis," they said, "you came here hoping to give your mother one day of rest. I want to give you more than that." The judge turned slowly toward a large button set apart from the rest, shining, golden, almost glowing under the lights. Luis followed their gaze, confusion flickering across his face. He had seen this on television before, late at night, through a neighbor's window. He knew what it meant, but his mind refused to believe it could be happening to him. "You see that button?" the judge asked. Luis nodded faintly. "Yes," he whispered. "This button," the judge continued, "is for moments that change lives. And what you did tonight changed lives." The judge lifted their hand. Time seemed to slow. Luis's breath caught in his throat. The audience leaned forward as one, suspended between hope and disbelief. The judge slammed the button. A deafening boom echoed through the theater as golden confetti exploded from above, cascading down like sunlight made solid. Gasps turned into screams. Cheers erupted, louder than before, almost overwhelming. The word, "golden," rang out from somewhere in the crowd. Luis dropped to his knees. The microphone slipped from his hands, forgotten, as he covered his face with both palms and cried. Deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere far beyond the stage. Gold rained down around him, sticking to his hair, his shirt, his skin. He felt hands on his shoulders as the judges rushed the stage, kneeling beside him, lifting him gently back to his feet. "It's okay," one of them said softly. "You did this." Luis shook his head, still crying. "I can help my mother now," he said between sobs. "She doesn't have to wash clothes every day." The judge pulled him into a careful embrace, mindful of his small frame. "Yes," they said, "you can." The audience roared again, many crying openly now, strangers hugging strangers, united by the simple truth of what they had just witnessed. Cameras zoomed in as Luis looked up, eyes red and shining, golden confetti clinging to his eyelashes. He picked up the microphone again, hands steadier now, though his voice still trembled. "Mama," he said, looking straight into the camera, "this is for you. You can rest now." The judges stood behind him, smiling through tears, as the applause continued, endless and thunderous. In that moment, on the stage of America's Got Talent, the poor Filipino boy was no longer invisible, no longer unheard. He was seen, he was celebrated, and his life had changed forever.